The chairman, I'm not very sure what are the protocols of this occasion, since I think many of some, at least, of the distinguished guests overseas that I know about, unfortunately, have been called away. And I know that even our host is not present, but we will enjoy his hospitality in his absence anyway. And so I'll just say the chairman and the representative of the president, the vice president, etc., if they're here, good morning, and my dear colleagues. I wish to speak about basically about the imperative of an open society if we are serious about fighting corruption, and also the necessity to involve the younger generation. That latter comes to my mind very obviously because this happens to be the year of the child and also the 30th anniversary of the signing of the protocols of the rights of the child. And tomorrow also, I believe, is the Human Rights Day, Global Human Rights Day, UN, so designated. And so you have these three strands coming together on an occasion like this, which only appears on the surface in a very simplistic way to be directed at fighting corruption. But of course, it goes much deeper than that. I shall try and limit myself to very difficult because I was told I had 10 minutes. I've just seen the program and it seems I have only 5. But anyway, the main, what I really had in full will be published and made available to those who are here and to those who are unfortunately not present. Let me say first of all that I expect that the youth contingent of this entire undertaking is strong and is among us. I fully expect that they participated, in fact, in the symbolic walk from the headquarters of the EFCC to this place. I once referred to my generation as the lost generation, and I remember that this provoked in a subsequent generation the expression, the statement, oh, Professor Soyinka, you don't know how lucky you are. You are merely, I refer to us as the wasted generation. And he said, you're very lucky, you're just the wasted generation. My generation, he said, is the lost generation. I don't know if either of us is correct or both. All I know is that we have on our hands a very anxious generation, and we have a responsibility towards them to involve them in events like this, since they are supposed to be handling the future on behalf of ourselves and history. In that connection, Mr. Magu, you have a case to answer. What's happened to the exhibition of the works of these young artists? The one on the theme of 1,000 Faces of Corruption, which you saw and which you invited to tour the country. We haven't heard from you ever since your people came and bothered us and worked with my young collaborators. This was in the context of one of the arts festivals, which I used to consult for in Lagos. And there was this youth section in which we used to set them themes every year. And one of them was the 1,000 Faces of Corruption. And events like that, I believe, are critical for any struggle, any undertaking of this kind, especially as it offers adults a window on their world, enables the adult society to see how youth see them, especially when it comes to events such as this. We have to constantly bear in mind that others see us rather differently from the way we see ourselves. And what better mirror on the adult world, in my view, than the vision of the child, which is the overall theme on which this exhibition took place. those paintings are still there and the essays. And Mr. Magu, if you don't collect them, I will auction them. And I'll give the money to one of the young organizations that sprang out of this experiment, this organization which were called the Corruption Busters, and which in fact was launched by the Vice President in December 2017. So work out that exhibition, as I said, I'll just auction them and give the money to this anti-corruption young group. Now, there is corruption, we all know, but we know that it involves numerous collateral forms of institutions and individual conduct, not as a constant factor, even when marginal. I beg your pardon, even when marginal, it has so many ramifications that affect almost the entirety of existence. For instance, in this country, we had a phenomenon of unsolved high-profile murders. And I wonder if anybody has ever thought, many of them, in fact, no report from the police in the end, they just brushed under the desk. But we know for a fact that some of them are the result of corrupt forces. Notorious example of former Attorney General and Minister of Justice of this country, Bolaige, was assassinated in his bedroom. It wasn't a political affair, it wasn't political rivalry or contestation. He was killed, we know, by the forces of corruption. And so it compels one to ask, what has happened to the investigation ordered by the president of this country into those high-profile murders? If we do not solve at least some of those murders, we'll never really get to the heart, to the core, the hard core of corruption in this country. And this involves also attacks on the instruments, the authorized and constitutional agencies of open society, such as the judiciary. To what end are we here, after all? What are we really engaged upon here? Is it just to ensure that people do not steal a few naira here and there? It goes beyond that. It goes towards the whole sanitation of society. It goes beyond corruption, mere material corruption, to ensuring, as I said at the beginning, that there is a kind of decent atmosphere, decent air to breathe generation. And sometimes this is couched in language which upsets powers, institutions. If I say, for instance, that this anti-corruption struggle is in itself an act of revolution, am I going to be thrown in jail right away simply because the word revolution frightens some people? And yet, go through history, Cuba, Soviet Union, China, Zimbabwe, wherever, anytime there is mention of revolution, one of the reasons cited is the commitment towards the eradication of corruption. So really, revolution, whether revolution now or soon or next or in the future, is always tied up with what is really rotten within society, to which we give the general name of corruption. And this is not a mere generalized statement. If, for instance, during an upheaval, any kind of unrest in society, an agency commits itself towards securing our very existence and the quality of our existence, if that agency takes fright from expressions such as I said, revolution, to the extent that it invades a citadel of justice, one begins to wonder where corruption really begins and where it ends. And when this kind of attitude is reinforced by other institutions of governance and national stability, such as legislative houses, who decide not just to penalize hate speech, toxic speech, fake news, but to decree capital punishment for what it considers hate speech, which might cause discomfort to some people, then we really wonder why we're assembled here addressing corruption, than addressing the real forces against open society, which alone can enable even the struggle against corruption. I think we're all disgusted. We despise fake news, hate news, destabilizing news, toxic news. But let's ask ourselves seriously what we think we're doing if we start chopping off the heads of those whom we consider to have offended our sensibilities, either as individuals or as institutions, especially if such action absolutely terminates the possibility of free expression, even though sometimes, of course, there is abuse of that expression. And I stand here as one of those individuals who've been most affected by hate news, fake news, even to the extent of having my identity stolen and abused and used in all kinds of ways against what I really believe in. But I'd be the last person to support any idea of terminating a recourse to information simply because some people abuse the means of that. And the answer to that is to hang people or put them before a firing squad. Well, when you take a combination, therefore, of a major principle, almost core security institution, you take that side by side with that of a legislative house, which curtails the possibilities of opening up society completely. And it looks as if we find ourselves completely in a slave plantation. The DSS, for instance, if the DSS is accused tomorrow of corruption, the DSS can say, yeah, this is hate speech, off with his head. And then maybe when we get to court, and the judge grants the poor felon temporary reprieve through bail, any security agency can then jump in the court, rearrest the felon, break into the citadel, the sanctuary of justice, and say we are rearresting this individual because he's indulged in hate speech. Let us be very careful in our responses to the malaise of society and make sure that we're not cutting off our noses to spite our faces. And within these last few days, we've had even that institution being accused of corrupt practices. We had testimonies from those who've managed to escape the hellholes of the security agencies after being immured there for years without knowledge of their families, their parents, their wives, those who, in fact, had to pay officers, it is claimed, in that organization, between 5,000 and sometimes 50,000 naira, thank you very much, 2 minutes left, I will, just to be able to get notice to the rest of us in comparative liberty that they have been held in dungeon for so many years, when such an organization itself comes under a cloud. I'm afraid, Mr. Magu, you have your work cut out for you to be able to adjudicate fairly between the accusers and the counter-accusers and those who deprive individuals of their liberty. So with just those quick remarks, greetings from myself and on behalf of the young generation of whom I have spoken, as well as the anxious and uncertain generation on this World Anti-Corruption Day. So let this morning's overture, this symbolic walk between the citadel of probity and this venue, let it become a walk for many of us in chains without the knowledge of the rest of us. Let it be a walk into freedom for all these. A long walk to freedom, wrote Nelson Mandela, under apartheid terror. I do not believe that we are living, I hope that we're not living under any kind of quasi-apartheid terror. But let that symbol, let that prelude be a walk for them into full liberty. Let it be possible for them to join us at the next anti-corruption rally, unless, of course, serious charges have been filed against them in the open court. And let's stop being scared of expressions like revolution now, to the extent that we immure a human being for over 100 days, inquiring what? Revolution now, revolution soon, revolution tomorrow, it doesn't matter. What we're doing right here now is revolution sometime or the other. Thank you very much.
I'm sure we can